Hey everyone, so I just wanted to show you how we can simplify this code using functions in Java. So you might remember our project right here, and the very first thing we really need to fix with this project is that right here, we say we're checking for the track width, but we need to actually check for we're not saying we're checking for the track width, but whenever we get an error, it says track width was not between, we need to say velocity was not between, because for the track width one it was fine, but for the rest, I made a mistake in the other video and said track width. So I'm going to fix that right now for all of these. Okay, so when you're converting code into using functions, the good first step is to try to find repeated code. And one good example of repeated code is this right here. We see this many, many times. So we're going to go and take this track width one right here and create, instead of that, we're going to create a new function called getFloat. And you'll see right here, whenever we create a new function, we want to create it below our main function, but still within our class. So we need to make sure we're within our class, and we're going to create a new function. We're going to make it static, and this is going to be returning a float. We're going to call it getFloat, and it's not going to take in any parameters. So let's do this right here. And we're going to want to wrap this within a while true loop just in case something happens in our example. So while true, just like that. Now you're going to see these two symbols are undefined. These two variables are undefined right here. So in order to fix that, we need to create a scanner equals new scanner system.in, just like we've done many times before. Perfect. Just like that. And one thing you might see is that, oh, also we need to make a track width. So in this example, because this is a general getFloat function, calling this track width would be a misleading name because we want to use this for more floats than just a track width. Whenever you're creating functions, you want to create them as general as possible so that way you can use them for lots of different cases. So in this case, I want to create a variable called float. We're going to just call it number because float is not going to be a valid name. So we're going to call it number, and we're going to say if number equals that. Now one other thing you might see here is that this scanner here, it says it's never closed. If we close our scanner, however, then what that's going to do is that's going to prevent us from ever going back. Whenever we call this function again, we're never going to be able to use our system.in again because that's going to be closing our scanner every single time. So we need to make sure we do not close our scanner. And then lastly, we just need to return our float. It's called number, just like that. And what are we having here? Unreachable code. That's because I forgot to put a break at the end of this. Perfect. So we have a scanner called scanner, and we are never closing this scanner, but I believe that this is probably just fine. It's probably fine that we're not closing it. It won't cause any issues in our short program here. But if you want to know more about using scanner and maybe use it in a bigger project, be sure to research what that close does and all of those things. But in this small project right here, it'll be fine. Okay, so now that we've created our getFloat method, we can simplify all of these right here to just string input equals getFloat, just like that. And this is going to do all of our checking for us. And this says cannot convert from float to string, or to, oh, this also needs to be a float. So we're going to just say this equals getFloat, just like that. We can do the same thing for this one right here. Let's go all the way to the top because we're doing a little bit out of order. So we're going to say track width equals getFloat. Perfect. Same thing here. Front left velocity equals getFloat. Perfect. And we could repeat this over and over again, but one thing you might notice is that this code right here is also being repeated for all of the velocity ones. The track width one is a little bit different because it's checking within different bounds. But for this velocity one, we could simplify this getting of velocity in general as well using our getFloat function. So what we could do instead of just typing it all repeatedly is we could create a function for getting specifically a velocity. So we're going to call it getVelocity, and we'll make sure we say what unit we're using in this function, inches per second, just like that. And we'll create our, we're not going to need to create our scanner. We could just get a float. So we're going to go while true, and inside of here, we're obviously, of course, going to need a break. Then we're going to want to create a float to store our velocity. Velocity. Perfect. And we're going to make it equal to 0. And then we're going to be returning that at the end, velocity. Okay, now we're going to, inside of here, make our velocity equal to get float. Just like that. So using that function we created earlier. And this is obviously going to print out an error. It's not going to let us get a float until we've gotten a float. Okay, now we want to do our bounds checking. So let's steal that code from this example right here. If, and then instead of this, we want to take our velocity like that, and we're going to need to copy these. Now, in this instance, we're having to use this variable twice, which is not great. We'll discuss other ways we can make it so that we only have to create one instance of these variables, but for now, we're not going to go into that right now, so we're going to just create it right here. So we've created our velocity min and velocity max within our function, and we've created our velocity right here. Velocity equals that. We're doing our bounds checking, which is just generally for velocity, and we're returning our velocity. So now, whenever we create a velocity, we could just say front left velocity equals get velocity inches per second, and then we could do this exact same thing for all the rest of them. Just like that. 3 and 4. And you can see our code has gotten a lot. What is, oh, I'm going to leave that. Okay, you can see our code has gotten a lot shorter, but more importantly, it's gotten a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to understand what's happening here. We don't have this huge pyramid happening like 20,000 times. We only have two of them right here. We have one pyramid here, one here. They're all within these functions, and it's a lot easier to understand what's happening in this code. Now, there are many things we could do to make it even more simple than this or more easy to understand. Coding is always about trade-offs. So what's this, what's better, what's worse? It's always about trade-offs, and different people can have different preferences, different ideas of what they think is the best way to do it. It's never going to be perfect. And that's why so many people create style guidelines and all these things about what they prefer. A lot of people have really specific ideas about their preferences. This is, of course, just one way you can create your code. And this is one of those techniques that you can do to make your code simpler. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful, and thank you very much for watching.